You are a psychologist. We're looking at the psyche, and I know that you've been writing a lot about this because obviously, this is obviously stirring something in you.
Yes, actually the writing is very cathartic for me because it helps me to get things off my chest that I can't, just.
Is it the silliest of seasons?
Worst, silliest of seasons. All right, but let me just say something. It's important that people understand that what we're saying here is our opinion.
Yes.
All right. Far too often I see people in the media saying things and stating it as though it's fact when it's really just opinion and speculation. And we have to be a little bit careful about that sometimes because people are impressionable and they could go away with the wrong message.
Oh yeah, I know. I get blasted on the political blogs every day. So every day.
Right? I think, in looking, my thing is always trying to connect the dots and see things, use insight to see things that maybe the average person would not see or wouldn't come about so, clearly, so easily. And what I can say very clearly from looking at the elections that have been held this year is that the population, there's a shift I'm seeing in terms of what the population expects from their representatives. You're hearing more and more people talking about delivery and talking about what's there for me and what has happened to me. It's gotten very, very personal. Now, there is still a strong, and there always will be, as far as I'm concerned, a strong, what we call a tribal base.
I want to ask about that.
Yeah.
Mr. I want to bring you into the conversation. This term, tribal politics, a return to tribal politics. Yesterday, Terence Dayal Singh actually gave us the first interview. And he said, shame on you, Ganga Singh, for bringing race and my Indianness and my ethnicity into the conversation. Is it all just political peacock? Are we too sensitive? Or is it that the politicians are just insensitive to what the reality is? Ian had this ad about the 25 projects in 10 days. And I know I want to ask about that. My director's telling me we have to take a very short break. When we come back, we'll continue this discussion. Stay with us. So we had Ben doing a piece about people talking about what can be done for them. It's about delivery. But then if you spin that, Ian's campaign was built on delivery. In fact, he said it. If I could do this in 10 days, imagine what I could have done if I'm your MP. That I have done what people cannot do. And if I had 5 more days, I will topple a party that's 50 years old.
Yeah. It's a hell of a thing when you can look at something that's been said and objectively without any sort of bias or any sort of attachment, and evaluate it for what it is. Because a lot of things that have been said, I just simply don't understand what it even means. Like that statement, for example, regarding the getting the project. It's such a loaded statement. What exactly was the candidate trying to say there, And it brings back to my point that I was making earlier on, that there's a whole bunch of voters who are looking on, who are trying to make sense out of the situation, and who right now might be very inclined to either sit on the fence or take a position against somebody as opposed to for somebody.
But are we the minority, that independent thinking voter? Am I a minority? I look at policy, I look at what you can really do, what can you bring to the parliament. When I think of parliament, I think of the pinnacle of the democracy of our country that we fought for, that policies are debated, the direction of the education system of which I'm part of is determined. But when you look at stuff, and then also I want to ask Ms. Deming, as a communications consultant, the ads that we saw, we're talking about badly behaved politicians. Dear Jack, thank you for the split the vote. Dear Keith, you're welcome. Split the vote, your divine right to vote. And this is about asking questions.
Yes.
What did you understand by a statement, don't split the vote, return to your home?
What I understand is that some parties attempted to go after their tribal voters and almost ignored the other voters who like to sit down and think through things and resolve issues and work things out. Because that kind of a campaign, that kind of a position, it can only appeal to your emotion. Who can say who I'm supposed to vote for?
But I don't know who we're a minority. Mr. Demings, are we a minority? I mean, I look at it and I think, you don't have a divine right to my vote. My vote goes to who I can relate to. And I always say it's who I can relate. What is it that makes tribal politics so attractive? Why do we feel, and even Terence Dayal Singh, and I know that I asked him some questions, and I think I ended up on his wrong side during that interview. When I asked him, if I listen to what you say, when he said they're attacking his Indianness, and shame on you for doing that. For me, joining the PNM, you question my religion, my ethnicity, my history, my dynasty. So I asked him, would it have been easier for him to join the UNC? And he said, by asking me that question, you are continuing the conversation of race. And But why is it that this conversation continues? Why is there this perception that once you're Indian, you go for the UNC, once you're not Indian, you will go for the PNM? And what about the mixed people? Where do you fall? Where was Deming fall?
Right, the mixed people, you know, present a very, very interesting situation. But it has to do with identity, yeah? All right, identity is core to any person. You must have a sense of who you are, where you belong, you know, where you fit in, what's your place, and so forth. And the whole tribalism, it sort of taps into that.
But is it, okay, so if Rhea looks like me, would I be automatically just gravitate to her because of that?
Well, it's a fact that in a situation where, let's say you're in a room with a bunch of strangers, people instinctively gravitate towards people who look more like themselves. That's a human trait. That's not anything racist. Okay. That's just a human trait.
So it's not racism.
That's an observed, tested human trait.
So that's a theory that's there. Right.
Correct.
So then how do we encourage proper human behavior and proper socialization? And maybe that should be the question. And Rhea's shaking her head. No, you don't look like me. But we're going to tag it with Rhea at this time, and then we'll continue this conversation after the news. Stay with us. I'm back from Trinidad and Tobago. Well, we do have some thoughts and some clips from the political platform that we will play for you in a little bit. But looking at the positions espoused over the last 4 elections, Ms. Deming, we made the joke about I've probably not seen as many elections as you have. But do you think it's getting any better? And I talk about the fact that when I look at a politician, I look at someone that speaks to me, that I can relate to. I also compare it to first world countries, as in, will I see Barack Obama or Angela Merkel making statements like this? Will she allow platform speakers to say the things that are being said on the platform? I actually follow campaigns. There was an election in Detroit for mayor. I follow that campaign to see what is being said and what is allowed to be. But are we being bad to the Prime Minister? Is it a strategy that they're using? Is it that she is keeping her speeches very clear, and yet her foot soldiers are doing the attacks? Can we hold her accountable for what's being said on the platform? We have being unfair. Is it because the media spends so much attention or put so much attention on this cannibalization that was taking place between the ILP and the UNC, that the PNM, because they didn't receive as much media coverage as the rest, and their meetings were not broadcast live? I think just 1 or 2 radio stations, and so they kept a little below the radar, as opposed to the things that were being said on the other platforms, which were thrown out into the public. And I was like, what? I can't believe they said that.
But you know, in doing a political campaign, you have to operate.
Really, what was the major impact, Daryl, in terms of the psyche of the nation, of the population? Did we reinforce negative behavior? Did we reinforce positive behavior? Did we encourage change?
Remember something, all political parties aim to get into power, okay? And any political entity will do whatever it thinks it needs to do in order to achieve that particular objective. That being said, I would really like somebody who is interested enough and has the resources to do some serious research into what people in our population, both Trinidad and Tobago, how they are viewing the way the last set of elections were conducted. I can remember as far back as 1981. I was 2 or something. Anyway, I could remember as far back as the 81 election, and I've never, ever seen the amount of mudslinging and the amount of negativity as I've seen in this last campaign. My suspicion is that that type of approach has appealed to the emotive side of the tribal voters. I keep using that word all the time. But at the same time, I feel it has turned off a lot of other people who may have sat down on the fence this time. I don't know if they will sit down on the fence in
2050.
When the next election is. When the next election is, all right?
Who is the real winner and the real loser here?
The loser, I think the loser is the UNC. I think the winner is Trinidad and Tobago, because we are seeing now that we can do it a little differently. What we've seen that to me is a big learning in this is a higher voter turnout, for instance, in the local government election. We've seen 2 by-elections. In my entire life, I have not seen by-elections in the way that we've seen it this time. Sure. So you're seeing, Trinidad is beginning to see that, you know, it can be different. We can have a by-election. No matter how it's triggered, we can have by-elections. They can be viable. And that to me is a good test. It's a good kind of practice for the general elections. And we have, when will the general elections be? I am going to take some bets again. I think they're going down to the wire. I think we're likely to have it all the way down in August 2015.
You're on a streak with those bets, so be careful.
I know. Daryl, your closing comments as we wrap this interview.
Okay, I just want to say that the powers that be, those who are in charge of the electorate, while I understand that they want to get into power and they will do whatever it takes, understand that there's a significant part of the population that's looking on, and I believe is getting turned off by what we are seeing. And I think that section of the electorate, because remember, it's not just the tribal votes, it's the swing votes that get you in power.
But if
that section of the population, our concerns need to be addressed also.
But if this approach was so wrong, then why was the race so close? If you are telling me now that, and I looked at it because, like I had this discussion off air, and I was surprised at how close the race was because they ran completely different campaigns.
I was looking at EBC's website to see some statistics on voter turnouts. Now, they only have, the only section I saw was for general elections, but what I could tell you, the highest voter turnouts we've had in the history of our general elections have been 1961, which was the year before independence, all right? 1986, when we had a 33-3, and 2010. So when people feel that there's a crisis, they come out. And when I say come out, I mean 1961, we had an 88% voter turnout. The closest we've had to that, 2010 was, I think, 69.8 or something like that. But generally, it's in the 50s to lower 60s. Those other years in between 50s to 60s, all right? So there's a whole chunk of people and a whole chunk of younger people now who have different concerns and who see things and see the world differently. There's a whole chunk of people who are likely to stain their finger, as they say, whenever the next election is. Right?
10 seconds, Mr. Temi, your closing comments.
There's a tremendous opportunity for the parties to bring forward fresh, young faces in order to connect with that 20% that the CSO has described as the largest growing sector in our country. So to me, that's where the money is.
Looking at where the money is, what the message is, and the type of behavior that we're seeing on the public platform, badly behaved public officials. We'll take a very short break. When we come back, we'll have more for you. Stay with us.